You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
وتكلم من هناك لشوارزنيجر.
Va a pegarle Ronaldinho Gaucho. Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! 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 ¡Golazo!
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
And good day, good night, and welcome to Soccer Today. Duane, today, we left the show yesterday by saying there was a lot of press at the Montreal Impact practice. Well, we actually had a statement by the president yesterday as well.
Oh, wow. Do tell.
Yeah, exactly. So let me read the statement of Joey Saputo concerning Didier Drogba, about Didier Drogba. So it goes as follows. We met with Didier. The situation has been resolved to the club's satisfaction. Didier has accepted to assume the role that the head coach sees fit while contributing to the success of this club moving forward. When he came to Montreal, Didier said he came here to win, and he still has the same objective. Our main priority now is to focus on the last game of the season and the upcoming playoffs. With the players and the leadership that we have on this team, we are convinced that we can make a run at the MLS Cup. End of the statement.
Well, there you go. What are your thoughts before we get into my thoughts on that, Kevin? They're closer to the situation there. What do you think? What do you think about that?
And after he read the statement, he mentioned his opinions. There was a Q&A period with the member of the press at the Centre Nutrilait yesterday, the training center of the Montreal Impact. So they talked about what Joey's thought and what was Joey Saputo thinking when Didier didn't show up. And obviously he felt disappointed. And he wasn't. He thought they were past that when they had that discussion. What happened in January? So it's funny that it's a couple things that didn't agree. And what came out of this is when they met in January, there was things that Didier Drogba wasn't pleased with and wasn't satisfied with Major League Soccer, probably the way things are done here. And there was more to it probably in January than we talked about and we figured. So now this came up a little bit as well. And yeah, but Didier is back with the team. He will be accepting the role that Mauro Biello gives him, starting 11, bench. We'll see what happens, but it's at least the situation seems to be resolved. But we only heard one side of the story so far.
Yeah. Well, the other side of this too is he said Didier Drogba has accepted his role, right? Is what they said. So what does that mean? Has there been any more talk on that front? We won't know.
It says that he has accepted to assume the role that the head coach sees fit. Will that change? Is he going to start against New England? You know what I mean? That can still be up for debate, what the role the head coach sees fit for Didier Drogba. But whatever that entails to be, he will assume that role.
Yeah, well, it's going to depend on the opponent, too, because part of what I read into Biello's decision last week related sort of to what kind of formation you wanted to put forward for that particular game. Not necessarily, at least I didn't read a long-term decision in that. Like, he didn't, to me, sound like the Drogba was going to spend the rest of the time on the bench, just that particular game, that particular circumstances sort of set himself up that way. So, He can't win for losing, though. Biello, I'm talking about right now, though, because if he starts Drogba because he wants to, people are just going to assume that it's because there was pressure from above. So I guess he could win for losing if he didn't start him. But that's
so you kind of have to double down and go with Moncoso next Sunday too.
Yeah. Well, and it makes sense, too, because Montreal's sitting in a situation right now, and we talked about this earlier this year, that regardless of what happens on Sunday, Sunday's really not that important of a game other than the home advantage, I suppose, which it does have some value, but the game later on that week is much more important, right? And obviously, if you were to win that game, you're going to have to turn around really quickly and play against. You're in a 3-8 situation, which is really tough for the knockout round teams. So, if you're looking at a player like Drogba, it makes a lot of sense. It's just logical. You probably shouldn't play him overly on the weekend. Maybe you should leave him for a 70th minute sub, an 80th minute sub, even just to try and get a spark if you need a goal late. But I think that when you're staring at the possibility of 3 games in 8 days with an old legs, it probably does make sense to save him for that Wednesday game or Thursday game, depending on when they schedule it. Do you not agree?
Well, yes, it does. And maybe the role of DJ Drogba of coming off the bench, which we have seen being effective for Montreal against teams like Orlando just a few weeks ago, maybe that is the answer too. Maybe that role suits him well. And what if he comes on the pitch with the determination that we know he can have, and you add a little bit of maybe chip on his shoulder, scores 3 in 20 minutes, talk about the Chelsea legend, Drogba legend banner still going to be hung, you know what I mean? Because that's the type of moment that he can still bring off the bench. We've seen him in the Champions League. Speaking of, we'll talk about later on the show. We've seen him come off the bench, score a very important goal late in games for Premier League, for Champions League. So, yeah, who knows? Maybe that's actually the role. And if he assumes it, it could be a threat.
Maybe he'll pull a D-Rose, score a goal, and make some kind of display like when D-Rose signed the check on the field a few years ago. That's just me wanting to watch the world burn there, Kevin. Sorry, no offense.
No, exactly. Funny. No, but it's very interesting what's going to happen. But at least, now it was a distraction, kind of. It has to be a distraction when this situation made headlines around the world. We're talking about, yes, it put the Montreal Impact on the map once again. And, we mentioned on the show yesterday that before that Drogba situation, everybody was going to talk about the Habs and the Habs home opener last night. And yeah, we talked about it. People talked about it. But DJ Drogba grabbed the headlines across the world. And it's kind of a blessing in disguise heading into the playoff, I feel, because guess what? Now they put an end to the situation, but that focus is still there. Make that focus towards the team, go on a run. It could be magical, and all could be forgotten very soon.
Yeah, and well, I do think that there's no chance he's back next year. I think that's pretty clear at this point. Yeah.
Zero whatsoever.
Yeah, so there's that. So he's sprinting to the end. Maybe he wants to play more, but I don't think it's going to be in Major League Soccer because of the frustrations that he's mentioned. So he had a good little run there with him. How do you think Impact fans are going to remember him in 3-4 years? Do you think that there will be a mixed emotions, or will be just entirely remembering the good times?
It depends, because there was some good times, but were they meaningful for the club's history? There was great victories with Didier Drogba. He wasn't here for the CONCACAF Champions League run. He came in after. They didn't really go on a playoff run. They won a playoff game, play-in game versus Toronto.
Well, in fairness, they weren't really playing a team that day, so
Yeah. And so he didn't have an impact there. They didn't win a trophy with Drogba to get that great moment. So it's interesting. He'll be remembered as a great player that played for the club. That is for sure one of the biggest names ever played in Major League Soccer, the biggest name, hands down, that ever played for the Montreal Impact. DJ Drogba will always be that. How will he be remembered? Will he become an ambassador to the world stage and say, oh, but Montreal Impact and MLS is the best league I've played with, and it's the best team I've ever played with? No, that's Chelsea. So there's that feeling too, that we're one of the girlfriends, we're not the wife.
one of the girls on the side for sure. Yeah, at the end of the life there. But no, look, he did help, I think, if you remember the Impact after they were coming sort of off of that Champions League run where there was the excitement and then a little bit of a dip in the attention and the attendance in there, and then Drogba came in and sort of boosted that up. So he probably did inject a little bit of momentum in the marketing side of the Impact. I don't think there's any doubt about that, as much as sometimes we don't want to talk about that on the soccer side.
Just look at the attendance this year, Duane. The most amount of sellout crowd in the Impact history this year at Saputo, a very high average if you're just counting Saputo. So he did have an impact on season tickets, the amount of walk-up, the amount of new fans and new supporters interested in the game. So DJ Drogba did have an impact financially on the market, the amount of Drogba jerseys sold, the t-shirts sold. All this was made possible because of DJ Drogba. On the pitch, he did have some great moments, hat tricks, good goal, free kicks, moment that will be remembered in highlight package forever for the club. He did have impact on games, yes, a lot. On the long run, Will it then be a championship? It's the only possibility is now. So yes, there is still a possibilities. We've seen teams go on a run, and if you look at the Montreal Impact, unbeaten in 3, 2 wins, 1 draw against Toronto. Yes, there was some drama last week. We'll see how they handle that against New England. That's technically still in, but yeah, 12 goals differential to overcome. They're dead. So what's going to happen on Sunday is probably indicative. If Montreal goes on and win on Sunday on the road, and then you never know what can happen. They're at home against DC maybe, and then they win that game, conference final. It can go really quickly, especially with a player like Drogba, that if he's used smartly and he actually wants to change the last week and make me so, you know what, I'm not going to be remembered as the guy who didn't show up for one game. I'm going to be remembered as the guy who went out on top, and he has an opportunity to do that. Can he? Will he? Does he want to? We'll see.
Yeah, he's potentially among the most dangerous finishers in the Eastern Conference. There's no doubt about that. I might rank him third off the top of my head in terms of potential danger.
Giovinco Piatti in front of him.
Yeah. That's the other thing too. Piatti, it's interesting you mentioned that. Just go back to your previous thought about the new butts on the seats that they came in and maybe they came to watch Drogba and they anticipated that they were going to leave after Drogba. But now they watched Piatti and they watched other great players that play for that team and suddenly they're hooked. It's not, some of them will walk away. There's no doubt. But some of them will stay too. So that had a positive benefit there. Let's turn our attention.
Because we mentioned DJ Drogba, marketing wise, he's the big name. Piatti is what a DP is on the pitch in Major League Soccer. That type of player that's a notch above everybody else, and he does it game in, game out, and tries to take advantage of every situation he finds himself in. And there's something as known as the Piatti goal now. When you come from the left side, cross in, cross out, curled it in the back post, that's a Piatti goal. So, those are the type of performances that we imagine if Piatti had the name of a Drogba, how big he would be, how big a superstar he would be in this league. Just because there's some language barrier, he's actually overcoming those barriers. He is actually very fluent in French now, did some radio shows in French. He's understanding English a little bit less, but he's getting better. So, he has the potential to be a big star if that is taken care of. But on the pitch where it matters, he, I think, is one of the top 3 players in this very league.
Is Piatti the second best athlete in Montreal right now?
Second to who?
Carey Price.
Sure, but he has the flu, so I would say Piatti's number 1 athlete right now. Right now.
Fair enough. 2 minutes left in this segment. Let's turn our attention to Drogba. And sorry, I said to you off air, and I do believe this, that probably what happened in the last couple of days is that someone within Drogba's inner circle sort of got in his ear and said, you don't want to end it this way. You need to respect your reputation and ensure that it moves forward. The other part of this too, Kevin, is that he wants to coach. He wants to coach at Chelsea. So what kind of message does it send to his future potential people that are under him, players that are under him, if he could just walk away when he wants, right? So that kind of messaging is something I suspect that someone within his inner circle would have probably got out there and sort of suggested to him that it was important for him to finish strong so that people would forget this little blip.
And interestingly enough, in the Q&A that came out after, Joey Saputo mentioned as well, Didier Drogba mentioned when I talked to him that he's a professional guy. He has a contract signed and he's going to go to the end of his contract and he's going to do what on his side of the contract. And part of it is to show up to games. So no, that's what mentioned. So it was probably part of the conversation. We won't know the details of that conversation. It's a private conversation, like Joey Saputo mentioned, between him and Didier, and he wants to remain it that way. But for sure, when you mentioned part of contract, it was a conversation for sure that entails to be, look, dude, you got to do it. So how about you come back and do it? And then in a few weeks from now, when it's all done, we can both go on our ways. We can both just move on and be better for it.
Yeah, I'm sure that we'll have a nice press conference and we'll say nice things about each other, and then you can go to London where you want to be.
Yeah, and we'll retire your number. We're gonna put your name on the wall somewhere to thank you for your presence and thank you for your contribution to the growth of this club. You'll become even if it's just on the wall, you'll become an ambassador, Hall of Fame type of figure for the club for sure, and that's going to be beneficial for the Impact going forward. Not necessarily for Drogba, but for Drogba, he can continue and move on without having a failing note on his resume about how his career finished.
Yeah, well, Montreal's a fun city. I'm sure Drogba will come back every couple years to hang out and to enjoy the fine restaurants and fine scenery within the beautiful city of Montreal. All right, Kevin, why don't we take a break?
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
It's Wednesday, Duane, and you know what it means. Champions League, and yes, there's a big game. We'll talk about that big game in the third segment. Barcelona, Man City, Duane. I know it's a big game that emotionally you're involved in. Well, there's a CONCACAF Champions League too. Let's not forget.
The Champions League.
The CONCACAF. Yeah, exactly. The Champions League.
It's like there's a friend of mine, a quick joke aside, Martin, who's a listener of the show, who's decided that the Canadian Premier League, that he's not going to call it the Canadian Premier League anymore. He's decided that he's just going to call it the Premier League, which I think is kind of funny. So that's the joke we're making here.
Well, it's kind of true because, Duane, it's kind of true because when you're eating Chinese food here and you go to China, it's just called food. So if we're talking about in Canada about the Premier League, it has to be the Canadian Premier League. And if you're in England, when you say the Premier League, you mean the England Premier League. It makes sense.
Yeah, the English get very sensitive about that. When you put England on it, they think that that's wrong, that they're the only Premier League. It's like there's only one city, there's only one United, that kind of stuff. So there you go. In fact, there are many cities and many Uniteds and a few Premier Leagues out there. So yeah, exactly. The CCL though, the ugly stepsister of world Champions Leagues, but it's ours, and we love it with all its warts, right? Why don't we talk a little bit about that?
It's Kevin? The last week of play in the group stage this week, and there was 3 games yesterday. One of your favorite team in the CONCACAF Champions League pool, Laramee Unido, actually got a victory at home versus my favorite team in the CONCACAF Champions League, just because of the name. Don Bosco, which sounds like a mafia hitman from the 60s or something. But Laramee Unido 2, Don Bosco 0.
Yeah, the Don Bosco is also a high school here in Toronto where the notorious Rob Ford coached football. So there you go.
Yep. Go ahead.
Tigres 3-0 win there as well. And we just go. I would rather than go through the scoring. Let's just take a look at the at where the things stand right now. Most of the spots are pretty much set, are they not at this point?
Yes, exactly. Well, some of them are up for grab. Like UNAM and Honduras Progreso are going to fight for the top. We have the Saprissa from Costa Rica and the Timbers. 7-6 in the points. We have Vancouver Whitecaps 12, Kansas City 1, Central 1. So that group is wrapped up from a long time ago. Vancouver is moving on. Laramee Unido is winning their group in Monterrey. So Monterrey actually eliminated. So one of the Mexican teams eliminated early in this CONCACAF Champions League. Pachuca Olympia are going to fight for the top of the Group E. Group F, Red Bulls have qualified. Alianza Antigua eliminated. Group G, UANL Tigres actually have qualified as well. Herediano eliminated. And the last group, Group H, sees FC Dallas with 5 points and Suchipiticas from Honduras with 5 points. Both of them still battling to see who moves on to the CONCACAF Champions League quarterfinals.
Bless you.
Thank you very much.
Some of these teams, man. Look, one of the important considerations from a Canadian perspective, from an MLS perspective as well, is that the Whitecaps, by virtue of them running with that group of 12 points, have in fact secured themselves the number 1 seed heading into the next round, which means that they will likely get just looking quickly at these groups here, they will likely get the winner of that group, Group H. They will probably, which means they could draw Dallas, which wouldn't necessarily be something they probably want, but they could also get. Can you say the name of that team again?
Suchipiticas. So actually, if you are a fan of the Whitecaps, you need to cheer for Suchipiticas.
I'm not even going to try it.
Suchitipe quiz, probably.
Sure, that sounds right. Yeah, but that's because they'll end up with 8 points. And just looking quickly at this this roster here, Saprissa it has 7 points right now, so maybe that might be where it was in the Honduran team. So there's still things to happen here, but Vancouver will absolutely get the lowest seed, which means that they won't get a Mexican team, and that's pretty vital in this. It's shaking out. Basically, when you look at these things objectively, it looks like we will have 4 or 5 MLS teams in, 3 Mexican teams in, and then the upset team, the Panamanians, Arab United, if you want to anglicize that, have made it up there. TFC fans will remember them not so fondly as the team that we put the Benny Hill music to on the social media side for TFC, watching them all dive in time waste down in a 0-0 draw down there during the battle days of TFC. So there you go. Arab United, everyone.
And if Suchitipiquez, the team from Guatemala, can pull off the upset today, it could be a great moment for club game in Guatemala. Very rarely do you see a club from Guatemala reach the CONCACAF Champions League quarterfinal stage. Usually it's American, Canadian, Mexican teams, Costa Rican sometimes, like Alajuelense, and we've seen Saprissa being very decent over the last few years, but rarely a team from Guatemala. And we already have a team from Honduras as well, which could be qualified depending on the result with the Pumas UNAM and Honduras Progreso. So Honduras Progreso in Group A could qualify, which would be considered another upset against a Mexican team in a Group 3 type of setting in the CONCACAF Champions League.
Precisely. Let's talk about the format of this. We've talked about this before, but we are at a year where I can't remember it having a lower profile, this tournament this year, than it's had in the past. Obviously, it didn't help that the Whitecaps were in a group with Sporting Kansas City and a team from Trinidad, so we're not getting marquee matchups here on Canadian TV, so we weren't really seeing it there. The Whitecaps struggles in the season sort of put a damper on interest in them as well. But, I mean, these games are on Facebook, for God's sakes, now and stuff like that, so you can't really find them that easily. Lots of the early hope about what this tournament might become. And I remember when it first became the CONCACAF Champions League as opposed to the CONCACAF Champions Cup.
Yeah.
I don't know what the answer is here. I don't like the 3-team groups, Kevin.
Go back to group of 4. Like, why complicate things? And yes, you want to maintain a level of competition to be high, but one more team per group, does it really change that level of competition? If you have the type of format that the Champions League in Europe have, maybe is the key. The one that they had for the 1 year was actually very interesting with the 4 teams per group, 2 moves on, and you have a bracket from there. And that talk about brackets. That's what people grabs attention. We talk about it all the time, every March with March Madness and every potential brackets out there now. It's all brackets. Playoff, it's a bracket. USL playoff, it's a bracket. People love brackets. I'll make a bracket out of it. Make it kind of easy. Make it I don't know, how many teams? 16, 32, groups of 4, 2 moves on, and you go from there.
Yeah, well, the way it used to work was they'd go 24 with they'd eventually get it to 4 groups of 4, 6. So they go 24 down to 16. So you'd have a knockout stage in the first round where you'd have a home and away, and then the winners of that would advance into the group stages. That actually, I believe, was the first 3 years of the Champions League was like that.
I remember when Montreal went in 2009 when they went deep. That's what was the format, because they played a team, I think was Real Esteli, and then they qualified to be in the group stage where they played like Joe Public and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and Toronto the following year lost to Puerto Rico Islanders. That's a famous result here, just for disappointment. And then the following year, of course, is when they went deep themselves. So, yeah, look, I like the 4-team groups. I also like what you just said, and that was what the CONCACAF Champions Cup was before. Now, it was only 8 teams, and it was run over a 2-week period. I wonder sometimes I don't like just 8 teams. I think because back then there were a lot of countries in CONCACAF, which is a big region, that simply didn't have a way in. For instance, Canada did not have an opportunity to make it into the CONCACAF Champions Cup back then. Neither did a lot of other countries down in Central America and in the Caribbean. So I don't like the idea of eliminating the option of teams, but I do kind of like the idea of condensing this tournament into a shorter sprint. Something maybe starting in February, and I know that's harder than the MLS teams, but it's at the start of the season for us, the near the end of the season, the middle of the season for most of the region. Mexico, I think that would make more sense to me.
Yeah. it's hard to like change the format and to make this type of format accepted by the teams, because you're talking about a type of preseason tournament. Then will it actually be taken seriously the way that it has been for some times? Let's face it, this tournament, there's a big quote in life that actually a motto, Duane, that it's you get out of it what you put in. That's what this tournament is. If you're a team like Club America, look, we hadn't even talked about Club America, and they're not even there. That's you have a big difference when you have teams like Montreal, like LA, like Toronto, that makes a big fuss about them being there late in the tournament. That tournament becomes important. When the teams that are in it are just in it because they have to, or are in it because they're in it, but they're not necessarily making it look bigger than it is, then it won't be perceived bigger than it is. So it's you get out of it what you put in.
Well, yeah, and look, the other part of this too, of course, is that we need a team that's not from Mexico to win the damn thing once to make sure to give it a little bit more something to it. So there's kind of right now a lot of these Mexican teams, and this year, to be fair, the results aren't necessarily fully going Mexico's way, with Monterrey out obviously, and Pumas sort of on the edge.
Well, they're playing W Connection. So they should have
advance, yeah.
Yeah, I think they're from Jamaica, the Blue Connection, or somewhere similar.
They're Trinidad, but yeah.
So exactly. So Pumas Unam should win at home. The question is, will Guatemalan Suchitepeques win against FC Dallas? But it's in Guatemala, so that's going to be interesting. It's tonight, 8 p.m. If you can find a stream. The other games today: Sporting Kansas City versus Central FC, a game that has no meaning whatsoever. Portland Deportivo Saprissa at 10 p.m. And that is meaning Portland maybe can move on. Olympia, Pachuca on the road, Pachuca on the brink, but they can qualify. Olympia is not going to fall over, though. So that will be another interesting game tonight.
Speaking of Arriba Unando, that's the adage that people in Toronto use to find out whether you're a real fan or not, is whether you were at the dead rubber 3 days after the regular season ended in a CONCACAF Champions League game that had literally no meaning. So that was I was there. There was about 4,000 people in the stands on a cold October night. I remember it well.
So in Kansas City tonight, if you are in Kansas City at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central on October 19th, 2016, consider yourself a diehard SKC fans, because that game has no meaning. You will be watching a 0-0 draw that Central FC will be playing their 18-year-olds probably, because nobody will care about that game.
Yeah, it's a pride game for sure. There's another couple thoughts here. One idea that gets floated around frustratingly a lot amongst MLS fans in particular is the idea to go back to a Superliga format, which would basically be to freeze out the rest of the countries, not necessarily Canada, because the Canadian MLS teams would be part of that, because it would be a Liga MX MLS sort of initiative rather than a CONCACAF initiative to go back to a Superliga. But for those that don't remember what the Superliga was, it was a tournament that, for the lack of a better way to put it, was the Europa League of CONCACAF back then. They had the four teams that didn't make the CONCACAF Champions League, and the four teams from the next four teams, and the next four teams in Mexico, they would play into groups of four in some kind of half-assed tournament. And it really was a terrible, terrible event that the only people that remember fondly are people that probably didn't watch it.
Like those.
So this is my position on that. The idea behind it, of course, would be to get more games between Mexico and the U.S. And I don't necessarily disagree with that being a good idea. But here, I'll throw another idea out. And I've had this one in the back of my head for a while. I do think that there's something valuable between having Liga MX and MLS games. There's a certain amount of intensity to that. But rather than have something like that, why don't have a cup? That's a unique situation. A random draw cup that all teams are involved in, and you play a game here and there, rather than play the stupid friendlies against the European teams. Play these games in here where they have at least some meaning to them in terms of a cup competition. That would interest me, to have call it the North American Cup or the North American Challenge Cup or something.
The CONCACAF Champions Cup.
Yeah, why not? And to me, that would be a far more interesting format than the Superliga idea that people have, because as I said, it would involve everyone. And the idea that you could go on a cup run. And there's the U.S. Open Cup right now, and obviously that's available to the American teams, and Voyageurs Cup up here is as such a smaller tournament that it's hard to think of it in the same way. But that would give you the opportunity to play more Mexican teams, because they do agree that those games are special. They have, even up here they are, because the players get into them a little bit. The American players, for sure, they want to prove themselves against the Liga MX competition, and unfortunately they've been left wanting a lot. But some of the best games that have ever been played at BMO Field that I've been at were the games against the Mexican teams, for sure. The Santos Laguna games,
Exactly. How fondly do you think those games are in Montreal as well? The Pachuca game, the return leg, where Montreal, Cameron Porter scored at the 87th minute with the opportunity. Those are the type of moments that you don't get in the regular season. You get them in those type of settings where a cup will lend itself to, like, no tomorrow soccer. That's what it's all about. And you get different type of games. And we just go back to a little more than a year ago to see that unfold before our very eyes. And that tournament does have value. But for some reason, depending on the year, depending on the club, some of the years the value is not the same.
Yeah. All right. Before we add any more congestion to the schedule that we don't have the power to do, why don't we take a break, Kevin, and we'll come back and we'll talk about some game that's happening this afternoon.
You're listening to Soccer Today on SPN Radio. You can find the on-demand version of this very show on iTunes, Stitcher, Feedburner, Podbay Player, Podbean, anywhere you get your podcasts under the Sports Podcasting Network feed. Subscribe to our YouTube page to make sure you never miss a live show talking about soccer today, the MLS postgame show, open lines after dark, 5 rings daily during the Olympics. Make sure you subscribe and give us a follow on Twitter at SportsPodNet, and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. Just a little game in the Champions League, just a little homecoming for Barcelona's very own Pep Guardiola, now coaching for Manchester City after a detour in Munich. What is your thought, Duane, on this game to start today?
That it will be over in a few hours and I won't have to worry about it for a couple more weeks, so they do it again.
Are you like not scared, but is it like all right, I have to face this once every few years? Messi, Neymar, Suarez. All right, it'll be over. It'll be over in just 90 minutes.
Look, to be serious, when the draw was made, obviously this was what everyone wanted, if you weren't a fan of one of the two teams anyway, because of the Pep story. The narrative there writes itself, obviously, and it is interesting on that level, I admit. But as a United fan, Jesus, no. You're probably feeling a big itch right now. Yeah, as a City fan, they played them recently, right? And it wasn't pretty. This obviously is a different team. Now their form right now is a little bit struggling, I would say. But although the game against Everton on the weekend, I don't think they're going to miss 2 penalties in a game too often, although they've done it twice this year already.
You're not going to have a goaltender or a goalkeeper stand on his head like that every single Sunday or Monday or Saturday.
Yeah, look, I love the commentators in that game. We're talking about Everton and discovered another way to play City. What? Give up 2 penalties? That's how you play City?
Exactly.
Like, yeah, that's repeatable for sure. Anyway, other teams should emulate that. Absolutely, I encourage it. No, this game, it doesn't have the same draw as it did in the past, is the point I was making with this. And obviously it's important. The group is such that with City getting the 4-1 win against Mönchengladbach, and the draw on the road against Celtic, I'm going to call that in hindsight now, although obviously it's Celtic. You would have liked to get the full 3 points. It was on the road. You can't discount the difficulty of playing on the road, even in Scotland, even against a team like Celtic that is the fourth team in that group. So they have the point on the road there. If they protect their home games, protect their home points against the non-Barcelona teams, they should easily go through as the second place team in this group. So
again, the non-Barcelona teams.
Look, Barcelona's at a different level right now. Like that's not be ridiculous here. Like I can't put my blue goggles are thick, but they're not that thick.
You might not have the best eyesight, but you're not blind.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I mean, look, can they beat them? I think that they could. And if they played 10 times, I think City would win one of the games. They'd probably draw 2 and the rest would go to Barcelona. That's kind of where I think they're at. I think that's an improvement over a few years ago where it would have probably been 0-9-1 type thing, right? Like this is a team in Barcelona that it has vulnerabilities. It can be it's just the same vulnerabilities as City, which makes this fascinating on a tactical level. They're susceptible to high presses. They're susceptible if you play at them, if you go at them. If you sit back on this team, on Barcelona, they will destroy you because they have 3 of the best strikers that have ever played the damn game up top. And perhaps, arguably, although they're getting on in years a little bit in the midfield, they're still like it's one of the greatest midfields that have ever been put together. Like this is just a team that of the ages. It's stupid good. So really, to beat them, you have to go at them. You have to get them away from their strengths, which their strengths is attacking and moving that ball and doing the same things that City wants to do. That's why this is so interesting. So how does Pep approach it? I don't honestly know. It's going to be fascinating to watch on that level because. Will just well be like who is going to go at the other team? Because as I said, Barca's strength isn't necessarily to go. They want to control the pace. They want to work the ball into the middle. They want to set themselves up and control possession and control the tempo of the game. Whereas City wants to do the same things. It's an interesting game. That's absolutely no doubt about it. But I do think that the idea that City will overcome this is you're asking a lot for that to happen.
Yeah.
And look, it's good on one level that they have them in the group because it means they can't get them in the knockout stage. But it's bad on many other levels because it means that they're going to be the second seed in the group. And they're probably going to be the second seed in the knockout stage, which means they could draw Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, PSG, which I think they could handle PSG. But they're going to get a better team, right? And that's kind of the downfall of this. But it won't be Barcelona. So there's that.
Well, and that's always, but they can always face Barcelona in a potential final. Let's just look. Quarterfinals on, Let's just look quickly at the groups that we have in the Champions League right now. We have Group A, Arsenal, PSG, Basel, Ludogorets. Big game for Arsenal today versus Ludogorets. So if Arsenal are up for the 3 points today, they could claim, not for sure, but they will be on top of Group A. Napoli, Besiktas, Benfica, Dynamo Kiev. Dynamo Kiev, Duane, I think I don't want to be dismissive here, but it's one of the worst team in the Champions League so far this year. Not necessarily the best performances. Same for Zagreb. Yesterday, Dynamo Zagreb had a very, very tough day.
Yeah. Well, these are teams that traditionally are more Europa level, to be honest, but it's interesting to me is the struggles Benfica's had early on in this tournament. It's not something I necessarily expected. Benfica is a team that generally is a little more competitive than that. Nice to see Besiktas. Well, they have 2 points, but they're still second in the group right now with Thibaut Hutchinson there, who just got his 100th appearance, 100th cap for the team last week, by the way. So that's kind of good for him, a high water mark for Canadians abroad.
Group C that we talked about: Barcelona, Man City, Celtic, and Mönchengladbach.
Speak really quick on that. Have you seen the photo that's going around? I retweeted this morning. It was a pub somewhere in Scotland that has Celtic versus, and then they have MU crossed out, MUN crossed out, MO crossed out, some German team. It's kind of funny. Mönchengladbach. There you go.
Exactly. Atletico, Bayern Munich, Rostov, and PSV Eindhoven. Madrid, Atletico on top of Munich right now. Interesting to see how that will unfold. Monaco, Tottenham Hotspur. Tottenham, a draw yesterday, 0-0. Couldn't get that finish. But it will be interesting to see if they finish second. Might be tough. If they finish first, maybe you're lucky with the seeding and get a potential winnable game in the quarters, or the round of 18. So that will be interesting for Tottenham Hotspurs.
Yeah, they go back to Group D. Atleti on top of the group. I love their goals. Their +2 goal differential is 2 goals for, none against. That's so Atleti. 2 games played, 2 goals for, no against.
That's so Simeone.
Best defensive team in the world right now, no doubt about it. And they're in with a chance again. Do not sleep on that club. They could finish the job one day in a final. If they can manage to get to the final and not face Real Madrid, I think they might win one.
Yeah, exactly. Just not against Real. One game that was yesterday, Duane, Sporting versus Dortmund in Portugal. Interesting tidbit of information. There was an indirect free kick in that game. Always interesting. It's the indirect free kicks and a goal by Sporting on that indirect free kick. But Aubameyang scored before that, and it finished 2-1 for Dortmund.
Yeah, the indirect free kicks are always fun in the box. It's why I want to change the handball rule. No one agrees with me on this, but I think it would be better to put all handballs in the box, regardless of intent, or result in an indirect free kick. That would be fun, and wouldn't be quite as punishing as what it is now, in my opinion. But that's a topic for a different day. Warsaw with their terrible fans are in last, so that's good.
Exactly. Well, yeah, that's good. And one team, Leicester, at home against FC Copenhagen. Leicester won. Copenhagen 0. Mahrez scored in the first half for Leicester to get another victory. Leicester actually doing very well in Europe, a lot better than England right now.
Yeah, well, and of note, they're the first team in the tournament to assure themselves to continue in January. Now, not necessarily in the Champions League yet, but they are assured of, at the very least, a Europa League spot. And for a club like Leicester, I don't think that's anything to dismiss, that they will be playing European football into the spring. Something that probably their fans didn't ever imagine was possible just a few short years ago. Also in that game, the Copenhagen fans lit off a whole bunch of flares in the stadiums, and UEFA is investigating that. There will be a decision on it sometime in November. Normally, the home team is also held responsible because their security is there, but they've declined to prosecute against Leicester in this particular case. So unfortunate for the English club there, but FCK, they might get a little slap on the wrist for lighting the flares off. It's no, they don't like flares in the Champions League, folks.
And the game of note today, outside of Barcelona, Man City, we do have all games are at 2:45 p.m. Eastern Time. Napoli, Besiktas in Napoli, Arsenal, Ludogorets, FC Rostov, and Atletico probably going to destroy Rostov. Dynamo Kiev, Benfica, Paris Saint-Germain versus FC Basel, Celtic, Mönchengladbach, and Bayern Munich versus PSV Eindhoven. One game like Bayern and then PSV, Duane, if it was like early 1990s, this would be a cracker of a game.
Bayern PSV could have been a Champions League final back in the 80s for
That's
sure.
What I mean.
PSV, the Dutch teams are fascinating, actually, how they've slipped off. I mean, we don't even see Ajax isn't competing or really that competitive anymore. PSV, this is kind of their level right now. It sort of speaks to the flow of money in Europe right now, and a lot of people have issues with that, and that is probably one of the reasons why a league like the Dutch league, which was among the best leagues in the world for many years up until about the 80s, is talking about that Atlantic League situation, that they now feel that they need to get more consistent competition for their top clubs as well, so that they can compete in Europe, because it's been a long time since really they've done much of anything, and with their national team struggling right now as well, it's kind of not the best time, best of days for the Orange right now.
We're far away from the total football revolution. Let's just put it that way.
Or even not young karate kicking someone in the chest in the World Cup final. That seems like ages ago now.
Yeah, exactly. And it was just, where's Robert Van Persie? Exactly.
Yeah. Well, the guy that, is permanently gray at the age of 27.
Yeah. You'd think he was like 45 and he was like 27.
Yes, exactly. Oh, well, here we go. Yeah, no, it's the Champions League. It's honestly, there's been so much football in my life that it's yet to really grab me this year. A lot of the knockout stages can sometimes be, the group stages can sometimes be a bit of a long haul to get through, and especially you focus on your own club. But I'm excited to get back in this now that I'm no longer running to small little stadiums in the GTA to cover games for League One. So I'll have more time and more energy to focus on this in the days ahead. And certainly as MLS enters its playoff rounds and its playoff situation, will certainly be phasing into European focus for most of the winter, Kevin.
No, exactly. We'll keep our focus North American as well. But Barcelona, Manchester City, 2:45 p.m. Eastern Time this afternoon. A big game, yes, because if Manchester City could pull off an upset, it'll be an upset if they win at Camp Nou, well, they could potentially go on and win the group. If Barcelona wins, well, it'll be what everybody expected, and Barcelona winning that group.
Yeah, well, they'll almost be assured. I think at 9 points to 4, assumedly, Mönchengladbach will have 3. I suspect after this weekend, it will come down to that battle for the second spot. And that's a position that City is used to being in. They won the group last year kind of by default. They backed into it. That's the strangest Champions League season last year for City. They never played well, and they made the semifinals. It made no sense. But at any rate, exactly. A draw, I think, would satisfy most City fans today. That would keep them in with a chance heading home for the return leg of this. Playing both games in November is at least they're not the injuries aren't as bad right now as City. In the past, they kind of been decimated by now. Sergio Aguero is made of glass, as we all know. So he, knock on wood, he hasn't really been hurt yet. So we'll see. Good times, fun times. We'll talk about it tomorrow, of course. We got some bits and bites to wrap the show up right after this quick break, though. So let's take it now.
You are listening to SPN Radio, powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
The Bits and Bites segment of Soccer Today, brought to you by the Sports Podcasting Network. Go to sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
I wish they were brought to me by Bits and Bites. I could use some right now.
I could use some pretzel and cheesy goodness right about now. Hey,
Tasty
Bits and Bites.
Garlic snack.
Go to email us, sportspodcastingnetwork@gmail.com.
I think that's I don't know who owns them, but yes, I could use some bits. I might go after the show and get myself some Bits and Bites. Do you think that sounds like a good idea?
Exactly. Right. So a few tidbits of news that you had for us.
Yeah, well, let's start with the other day. Last week, we talked a little bit about Christine Sinclair on the women's side. We haven't talked about women yet today, so let's get this. Let's talk about them now.
Well, yeah, there was a press conference and an announcement in Vancouver, and it turns out we were all right. It was about a friendly, and it was about new partners as well on the corporate side to finance a program.
Yeah, precisely. And look, I mean, that happened last week to announce a friendly. It's against Mexico. It's in February. It's to celebrate the back-to-back bronze medals. They alluded to the fact they're probably going to set up a bit of a tour as well. So they'll go to probably Winnipeg and Edmonton and maybe into Hamilton as well. So they'll kind of hit some of the they'll hit all the regions, sans the East and Quebec. What kind of interest would a women's national team get in Montreal, do you think? Do you think that they could draw for a one-off game there?
Yeah, if it's if radio, if TV helps it, if you have José Bélanger and Ryan Wilkinson from Montreal help promote that game and do the radio, the com rounds, right, and do all the spots and help. Yeah, okay, it can draw. You can fill Stade Saputo, I believe, and especially when they say, "Oh, it's the tour, it's to celebrate the 2 back-to-back bronze." That I think there's a potential there if you have time enough to hype it and to promote it correctly.
Yeah, fair enough. It probably seems like an area they should get into. It's been a long time. I can't remember the last time the women played in French Canada outside of, obviously, I was at a game in Quebec, but that was in the World Cup, so that's a bit different. Friendlies for sure. Anyway, the other part of this too is, of course, because a few of us pointed out that the press release sort of looked like a retirement announcement. We weren't reporting that, but it looked like a retirement announcement, so we gave the potential that it might be. And she was asked about that at the press conference on Friday and kind of laughed it off. And then she added a few more statements yesterday in an interview where she said that she still had a lot of things left that she wanted to prove and do, and she wasn't going to be retiring anytime soon. So that's likely good news for the fans of the Canadian women's national team.
She wants to be in the 2019 World Cup, Duane. Why? Because she feels that they might have a chance to win it. Why not? You just won back-to-back bronze. The only thing that she hasn't won is the Women's World Cup. If we're talking about winning, because, yeah, true, she hasn't won a gold medal in the Olympics. But that would be the biggest thing, and maybe it's possible, and maybe 2019 is the biggest year, and maybe she can retire after winning a World Cup. Who knows?
Yeah, I suspect she might. She wouldn't say it out loud, but I suspect she might like to pass Abby too in terms of the goals, which is, as we've discussed before, possible. I don't think it's necessarily a sure thing, but it's possible if she plays for 4 more years and scores at the rate that she did. In fact, I did the math. If she continues to score at the rate that she scored throughout her career, even if you knock off about 20% for age, she probably would pass her sometime in 19 or 20. So that would be a nice little thing for the program too. Yeah. And I'm sure that the CSA would promote the hell out of that if that were to happen, Kevin. But let's move on. I do have something I want to. This is a bit lengthy, but there is a lot of people ask these questions all the time about playoff scenarios heading into the final week of the regular season. So there's a good post out on Reddit right now that displays this. So I'm just going to quickly go over some of these playoff scenarios so that we know them. Real quickly, just going top to bottom, east to west. The New York Red Bulls have clinched the first round bye. They can clinch their number 1 seed in the East if they win or draw against Philadelphia, or if NYCFC loses or draws against Columbus, or if there's a loss and a New York win, but the combined margin of victory is 12 or less, then New York will win the Eastern Conference. So basically, New York has won the Eastern Conference. NYCFC has clinched at least a home playoff game, can clinch a first round bye with a win versus Columbus or a Toronto loss or draw. Pretty simple there. We've already gone all through what they have to, the crazy scenario, which would get them first place. So don't really count that one out. TFC has clinched at least a home playoff game, can clinch a first round bye with a win versus Chicago plus an NYCFC loss or draw versus Columbus. That's a pretty simple one right there. DC United, they've clinched a playoff berth, can clinch a home playoff game with a win versus Orlando or a Montreal loss versus New England or a Montreal draw versus New England, provided DC United does not lose by 8 goals. There you go. Even Canada did not lose to 8 goals in Honduras, so that's not called that one likely. The Impact have clinched a playoff berth, can clinch a home playoff game if they win versus New England, plus DC loses or draws versus Orlando, or if they draw versus New England plus DC lost versus Orlando by at least 10 goals, which I don't understand why that's different there, but anyway. Yes. Philly can clinch a playoff berth with a win or draw against the Red Bulls, a New England loss or draw versus Montreal, or a loss plus New England win, provided the combined margin of victory is 11 or less. We've already been over this. And the New England Revolution win in Montreal plus Philadelphia loss versus New York, provided the combined margin of victory is 13 or greater. So,
so New England is not making the playoffs.
Yes. FC Dallas have clinched a CONCACAF Champions League berth in a first-round bye, can clinch the Supporters' Shield with a win or draw versus LA. Colorado, or if Colorado loses or draws versus Houston, pretty straightforward there. Colorado has clinched a CONCACAF Champions League berth in a first-round bye, can clinch the Supporters' Shield with a win versus Houston, plus a Dallas loss versus LA. Again, pretty simple. The Galaxy have clinched at least a home playoff game, can claim the Champions League catbird seat, which means that they would be the first team to get it if say, Toronto or Montreal were to win the MLS Cup, and they wouldn't get that spot, right? With a win versus Dallas plus an NYCFC loss versus Columbus, a draw versus Dallas plus an NYCFC loss versus Columbus. So LA is like kind of the team with the least in play this week. Really, that is not much of a prize that they're going to finish third. RSL can clinch a playoff berth with a win or draw versus Seattle, a Kansas loss or draw versus San Jose, and a Portland loss draw versus Vancouver. They're pretty likely to get in. There have to be a lot would go wrong. Can clinch a home playoff game with a win versus Seattle, a draw versus Seattle, plus a Kansas City loss or draw versus San Jose, plus a Portland loss draw versus Vancouver. Seattle can clinch a playoff berth with a win versus RSL, a Kansas City loss draw versus or Kansas City loss or draw versus San Jose, or a Portland loss draw versus Vancouver. They can clinch a home playoff game with a win versus Real Salt Lake. Very straightforward versus Seattle. Sporting Kansas City, can clinch a playoff berth with a win versus San Jose, a draw versus San Jose, plus a Portland loss and or draw versus Vancouver, a loss versus San Jose, plus a Portland loss versus Vancouver, provided Kansas City loses by the same or lesser margin than Portland. They can clinch a home playoff game with a win versus San Jose, plus an RSL Seattle draw, plus either a Portland loss or draw versus Vancouver, a Portland win versus Vancouver, provided Kansas City wins by the same or greater margin than Portland. Last one, Portland can clinch a playoff berth with a win versus Vancouver, a draw versus Vancouver, plus a Kansas City loss versus San Jose, a loss versus Vancouver, plus a Kansas City loss to San Jose. Provided Portland loses by a lesser margin than Kansas City, they can clinch a home playoff berth, which is unbelievable. They could still get a home berth with a win versus Vancouver, plus an RSL Seattle draw, plus either a Kansas City loss versus San Jose or a Kansas City win versus San Jose, provided Portland wins by a greater margin than San Jose. Did you get all that? There will be a quiz.
Yes, I got all that, Professor.
All right. As I said, it's on Reddit. If you want to track it down, let me give credit to the guy that wrote it.
So what I got out of it, New England San Jose are not making the playoffs.
Yeah, there's a lot that would have to happen. Well, New England is the team that there would have to be some kind of, biblical thing happen for New England to make the playoffs. San Jose, same situation, really. Like the playoff matchups, the 12 teams that will be in the playoffs are pretty well set right now. There is a lot of jiggling to go around, especially in the West, with who's going to play where and who's going to get home dates and all that sort of stuff. A little bit in the East, that bye between Toronto and New York is I think, probably the key battle, because that bye is very important, as we've said before. So, if you want to go look at this and get this sheet out, your little cheat sheet, and watch it at home, if you don't know this, if you have MLS Live, you can watch wraparound coverage on Sunday if you want to, if you're neutral and you want to watch all day action come in at once, sort of frantic style, March Madness style. They will be doing that again. I think that's, as I said last week, the reason that they also did it last week is there was kind of more at play last week than there is this week, and that's the second year in a row that's sort of happened where it kind of gets sorted out for the last week. By the way, the poster goes by the handle WJ Morris 3, so I want to give him some credit for taking the time to write all that out. Kevin.
Exactly. You had another type of news. Ned Grabavoy announced his retirement.
Yeah, look, not much to say on that. That's an MLS warrior, one of those MLS guys that has been around a while. Certainly, the Portland fans will be sad to see him go. That's a team that I think is kind of going to be in transition at the end of this year, especially with the struggles they've had and the potential of missing the playoffs. I think they might sneak just in, but certainly Portland has not lived up to the title of defending champions this year, and they may need to make some hard choices in the offseason, and one's already been made for them. I also wanted to mention briefly that Marco Delgado, TFC winger, re-signed for 3 more years this morning. That just came down right now. Of course, we don't know the salary. We won't know till MLS PU puts it out next spring. Interesting that they would lock him up. There is the expansion draft to consider, which, is going to put a player like Delgado in play, I would think. But the fact that they probably signed him for 3 years and he's fairly young would suggest to me that they're likely to probably put him on their protected list. It's interesting this year too. There's much less players being selected in the expansion draft this year. They're trying to move away, I think, from the leaning on it to. They sort of want the teams to kind of build their teams in other ways, which makes a lot of sense to me.
Transfers,
I think this idea,
free agent signings, and just recruiting players like we've seen with Minnesota and Atlanta so far.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that makes expansion drafts to me. Especially if a team like Toronto, for instance, or any team that's Toronto or older, have gone through so many of them, especially if you're older, because you had the Toronto one to deal with as well. So basically, since 2005, there has been constant expansion in this league. So you're continually losing players that you like and that you want on your club, right? And I don't think that's healthy to do it as much as they are. So it's probably a good move that they're moving away from that. It's especially unfair to me, like, again, to go like TFC, for instance, back to, not to be TFC centric, but it's certainly front of mind in my mind, that in 2008, Christ, they've been in the league for 1 year and they weren't very good and they had to give up a player. That doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. I think there should at least be some kind of provision to protect the expansion teams for a few years from losing their players that they just got. However, that's neither here nor there. MLS is pretty addicted to some of the trappings of North American franchise leagues. So, the NASL tinfoil hat brigade can have fun with that statement. You can clip it if you want, guys. All right, Kevin. Any final thoughts?
No, it'll be interesting. We'll be set up to watch the Champions League this afternoon and talk all about it tomorrow. If you're looking for USL Wednesdays, because of the USL Cup, we will have more coverage in the upcoming shows. So tomorrow and Friday, we will be previewing this USL Cup final that will be on October 23rd. So we'll be looking forward to that.
8 p.m. It's on ESPN in the States. I'm not too sure what
ESPN
University.
Yeah, ESPNU.
So we might need to find a way to watch it if you follow. But up here in Canada, which is unfortunate. It's the same with the NWSL final, is that you had to sort of search for it. We'll figure that out if we can. I'll put an email out and see if there's a way to legally watch in Canada. All right, Kevin, on that note, as always, you say goodbye.
Until tomorrow, 11 a.m. for Soccer Today. Well, have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.